Hello, welcome to Pop's Garage. Glad you could join us. As you can see, I'm not John Parker. My name's Bob Jamison. My wife Susan and I have been good friends of John's, Sally's, and Cordell since we met back in 2019. And his baseball story, his life story is very interesting. And so I hope you'll come with me, join us as we talk about that and how we got to know each other, but more importantly, just the impact that Jesus has had on this family's life. So come on in and we'll wait for John, and he should be coming up the driveway. Well, here he is right now. Glad you could join us. I didn't want to have to talk that long.
How's it going, Bob? How you
It's
doing?
going
Good to see you, brother.
Good.
How's the wife?
Doing well and waiting for baseball, but we got a long way to go. It's only November. So.
Yeah, we're not going to talk about professional baseball today because I think we're both kind of sad the way the season ended, but
very much. At least Braves fans had a really great regular season and an exceptional team. If you're a Cardinal fan, to have the first losing season in decades is hard to swallow.
But personally for me as a Braves fan, I couldn't even watch the playoffs because everybody was like, "Oh, this is going to be the year. This is the year they're going to do it." Blah 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 blah. Yeah, I mean, I grew up in the '90s as a Braves fan, so I mean, we don't have to talk a whole lot about where that was. But
well, it underscores the challenge right now of having multiple playoff levels.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it used to be for decades it was the National League, American League. You played the World Series and you were the champ.
Yeah.
And you had the impact of a mostly 154 game schedule, 162 the last couple of years.
Yeah.
Before that happened, you went to divisional playoffs and then to the World Series. But so you had your best teams because baseball is as somebody says, not a sprint, it's a marathon.
Right.
And so the best team comes out almost always at the end of that length of time. But then you get in a short season, a short series, and it can end in a hurry, and totally the wrong team can win.
Yeah. And if Bob sounds very knowledgeable about baseball, he is just that. I actually met you at a baseball game.
You did, and it's a funny story. 2019, my wife and Susan and I, we had Vanderbilt baseball season tickets. We're out in left field, and
no pun intended.
That's true. I did come from left field, didn't I?
Yeah.
But, so we're there, and there's this young couple sitting down the row in front of us and over a little bit to our right, and she was enjoying the game and everything else, and the guy with her was just an absolute root for Vanderbilt guy, and very vocal about that.
Was he a loudmouth guy?
He had a very loud voice.
I think he's toned it down a little bit since then. Maybe the people that go to games with me might differ with that description of me at games, but I actually tricked my wife into coming to that game that night.
That's what I understand.
We were given tickets for Saturday night, and I knew I was going to get tickets for Friday night, so I was like, okay, I'm going to trick her. I'm going to say, hey, let's go to Ted Montana's on West End. Ted Montana's, if you've never been there, it's fantastic. And when we went to pick up the tickets, she's looking and she's like, oh, they gave us Friday too. And I'm like, really? And I didn't say anything the whole ride down there, even through dinner. Like, when we were finishing up dinner, and I was like, well, honey, it would be kind of convenient, us being right here, if you wanted to see your Vols play tonight, we'd go over there and watch them. And, I was loud, and I think before the end of the game, maybe I didn't have a voice or something like that. But, we met y'all that night, and, it's always funny to me when you hear the saying, like, God's put certain people in your life at certain times for certain reasons. For us, it was a great time because we didn't know COVID was coming. So we had been going to a church, and we were actually doing pretty good, we thought. And, the struggles of COVID and everything else with everybody worrying about their jobs and this, that, and the other, we actually looked to Bob and his wife for a lot of inspiration. We even met over at y'all's house one night and had a little marriage counseling or whatever you want to call it, and it was great. And y'all gave us some advice, we took it, and good things happen. It's great to be around people at a baseball game and then become a lifelong. I don't even call you a friend anymore. It's more like family.
Well, as I was telling you before we were getting things going here, Susan and I kind of consider you, Sally, and Cordell as you and Sally as our adopted nephew and niece, and then Cordell would be the great nephew, and he is a great nephew.
He would love being called the great nephew.
He certainly is, and just getting to know you and Sally and Cordell, and with the extended family, especially getting to know your dad and Sally's parents, and that has been very meaningful to us, and it's been a great friendship that's accidentally developed.
Yeah.
And I could easily see, we went one game and you didn't, and that could have gone a different way, but it's worked out well. And what I'm remembering, you were talking about your voice, and there later in the season, there was a game where you got there late or something, but you were with some friends in the parking garage.
Oh, yeah. That parking garage is a good one.
And Susan and I were commenting on that as the game was going along, and then I wondered if you might be there. Mm-hmm. And all of a sudden, you could yell, yeah.
Yeah.
And I'm not going to try
Me and my buddy Hargis would put out there, yeah.
And so we heard that from about 200 yards away.
And so you knew I was there.
We knew you were there. We very...
I do like to make my presence known when I pull into that parking garage right across the street from the VA. I parked there for all Vandy events. We were just there Saturday. Had a big time with the tennis team after they got done with practice. But you may be wondering why somebody else is hosting today. And, a lot of people wanted me to tell my story. And I didn't want to do it first because I really don't want to make this podcast about myself. But there have been some things in the last 10 years that have happened that, hopefully can encourage somebody or let them see that it's, don't give up. It's never too late. Man, I should have brought some tissues out here, Bob.
Well, you're going to be fine. You'll be fine.
But I guess we'll just start where, we'll start at Cordell's 10th birthday party.
I was going to say, just for those of you watching this, when we first got to know John, and he told us his story and the path that he had been able to take in the last 10 years, and talking about the influence that Sally had, and then the impact of going to church and getting back together,
right.
As people like to say, getting right with Jesus, the impact it had on you, right, and the impact it had on Cordell.
Right.
I mean, that,
right.
Anytime you're a parent and you hear that about a young person, that's very moving, very touching. And so, I would, I know people love to hear this.
Yeah. Well, most people know that I was raising Cordell myself, which actually I had a lot of help from my mom. Like, people were always like, you're this great dad. And I'm like, do you really know all the stuff I was doing? I was like, my mom kept my son for, a lot of the time till he was, 8, 9, 10 years old, because of decisions that I was making that wasn't great. And when I was blessed with custody of my son, my parents were really supportive of me in doing that. And I can remember the day I got full custody of my son. I walked in with my dad and I said, we got him. And he grabbed me, and my dad's a big old boy, and he just grabbed me and hugged me, and I could feel his tears, and as a father and son growing up, I think a lot of times we're taught to not show our emotions. But once I got comfortable showing my emotions and realizing that it was okay to let other people know that I was hurting, or that I was down, or that I was great, and this is how I got there, I think it's important to share that with people, because we can put on Facebook that we're happy all day long and be the most miserable people you've ever been around, And so for me, when I got custody of my son, it was a growing up stage for me. Growing up in your 30s is what I tell my son is not fun. If you can grow up in your teenage years, that'd be much better. But I had my own plan back then. But being blessed with custody of my son and my parents who had me in church my whole life up to 17 when I stopped going. I'm grateful for that now. And I'm grateful that what I thought was them keeping a big cover over me was really just them trying to protect me. Because, I find myself saying, well, I would have never done that with my son. And then my son does something, he'd be like, well, isn't that what your parents made you do? And I'm like, oh, yeah, I guess it is. Well, yeah, that's what you're doing too.
Yes, yes.
Cordell's great. And, around his 10th birthday, we had a big, huge birthday party. And, man, we had songwriters out there. And there was probably 100 people at my house. I mean, we just had this big blowout. It was probably inappropriate for a 10-year-old's birthday party, but that's what we were doing at the time. And the next week, Cordell came down with his appendix was rupturing. So he had to go to the hospital and get it out. And he had this sweet little nurse. And we knew each other from somewhere, but we didn't know from where. And, we exchanged phone numbers and stayed in touch. And, when Cordell got out of the hospital, she brought my mom flowers. Yeah, so she was like, hey, I want to come check on Cordell. And she was going to check his bandages and stuff. And she shows up at the door with my mom flowers. And I was like, okay. I didn't really understand because my mind wasn't even going there because I wasn't looking to get remarried. But sometimes God has a different plan for us, as you know. And his plans always seems to be better. We might not understand it at the time, but man, I wouldn't give anything for the life that I have now.
Well, one of the things too, you talked about Sally taking a liking. I'm recalling that she made the comment that she actually had fallen for Cordell as somebody she'd like to have as her son.
He is cute.
And then well, maybe I can take his dad with me.
Yeah. It was kind of like a 2-for-1. I think she probably liked Cordell more, but it was like if you got him, you got me package. So we hooked her up with a little Christmas special, and we got engaged in February, and we got married in May, and we had a beautiful wedding with her family down in Florida, and and then we came back here, and the funny thing about Sally is as soon as she got here, as soon as she walked in the door, it was almost like she was a mother figure to my son. Almost immediately. And we wasn't looking for that. She wasn't looking for that. And it was almost like God just put us in her life, and thank goodness her and ours. She ended up adopting Cordell. That's mama to him.
Oh yeah.
Her name's on his birth certificate. It's legal. We have the papers, and not that we had to have that because we already knew that she was his mom. But for Cordell, he needed that piece of paper.
Sure.
When he seen that piece of paper the first time, it was crazy. It was just the emotions that come out, and and even when we go through things now, he'll be like, Dad, all I care about is you and Mom here. He was like, I remember we were going through a hard time last year, and I was like, do you want to do this? Do you want to do that? And he's like, Dad, I don't care anything but you and Mom, and that's it. And one tear went down his face, and that's one of those proud dad moments.
Sure.
Because obviously when you have a kid, whether you plan on it or not, it requires a lot of growing up, and really you just want them to be healthy. Not that you wouldn't love them if they wasn't, but you just want a healthy kid, and you want them to be loved, and you want people to love them, and you want them to love other people. And I'm just grateful that he had my mom, because if he had my guidance for his first 10 years and that's it, nobody else, I don't think he would be the kid he is today without my parents.
Well, I remember a couple of times when we were going to the baseball games in Nashville, we'd give him rides, and you could tell that your mom and dad had just had a really powerful impact. In fact, first time we went to a game, we picked him up here to take him in, and I knew how he loved to come here, and this was very, very important to him.
Yeah.
You mentioned going to church till you're about 17. That sounds like somebody else I know who didn't figure it out till when he was in his early 30s, but you had a really good movement back.
Yeah, I see. When I was 17, I thought that my parents were, they're shielding me too much. They won't let me do this. So if I can get out of the church, I can do whatever I want to do. I can get my own place. It'll be great. You know how that works out, but you don't realize that your parents paying your car insurance, your parents paying your cell phone bill. You're only going to high school. So I did make the decision to go into the work field early, which I regret. I wish I would have enjoyed school more and really appreciated my parents for what they offered. But when I asked my father-in-law, Mark Frazier, if I could marry his daughter, he asked me one question, and he said, "Will you go to church with us? We're really involved. I play in the worship band, and my wife serves, and would you go to church with us?" And I said, "No." I looked him right in the eye and I said, "No, and please don't ever ask me." I said, because asking me to go to church is like telling me to run, because that's what I'm going to do. So he said, "Okay." He said, "Well, I'm going to pray for you until your heart changes." And 3.5 years later, he baptized me at his church. And we went there for several years, and it was great. Cordell used to play in the band there, and y'all actually come to some of his worship things that he did at the Experience. The Experience is a great church, and they do a lot of great things in this community, and I love Corey Trimble to death. And his story actually helped me to have an interest in becoming a church, because I could relate to where he come from and the things he had battled with. So that was the first thing that drew me to that church. And then, we went there for several years, and then COVID, and then, everybody got out of the mood of going to church for a while. And I actually hadn't been going to church in probably a year. And I had this guy that I used to do fundraisers with, Bishop Jimmy L. Tyson. He had this truck called the Holy Smoker. And one day I was doing this fundraiser, and I was Googling everybody, and everybody was like, $1,000 and we'll show up. Well, I don't have $1,000. We're trying to a fundraiser.
Right.
And they were like, "Yeah, we can't help you." Well, I seen Holy Smoker, and I was like, "Okay, this must be a Jesus guy. Let's give him a call." And he's like, "Hey, I'm really busy right now. I'll call you this evening. Just tell me what you need." I told him what I needed. He called me back that evening. He said, "John, I'm sorry to tell you I can't be there." He said, "But what I will tell you is I'll make all the food. I'll pull all the pork. I'll get you 200 hot dogs. I'll get you," he had me 25 pounds of, maybe it was 22 pounds of pulled pork. He brought a warmer to keep it warm. I was supposed to go meet him, and I was so busy, and he was like, "Don't worry about it. I'll run it out to the church." He ran out to this church right down the road here. And we had a great fundraiser, but so I would go, when his food truck would show up in town, I would go just to support him, because that's what he had done for us. And he would always be like, "Hey, I got this church, because he would always have us pray before we got started. I'd get there first thing, and we would always pray together. And he would always ask me to go to church, and I'd be like, "Sure, Bishop, I'll be there," And then June of last year, I got diagnosed with stage 4 metastatic lung cancer. And I called and told him, I was scared. I called everybody. You remember those phone calls?
Yes, I do.
And we didn't really know. We were so lost, Bob, and we really didn't know where to go. And Bishop Tyson said, "John," he said, "I'm going to ask you to do something." He said, "I really want you to do it." And I said, "Okay, what you need?" And he said, "I need you to come to our church and let us pray for you." Well, I'd already been telling him for the year that I was coming, so it was already way overdue.
Sure.
But one thing he has taught me is that God doesn't make mistakes, and that when it's time, you'll come.
Mm-hmm.
And we went to that little church, man, and it was at Bradley Academy. God's done blessed them with another place since then, but they were at Bradley Academy, and they were having their 1-year anniversary. So they had 2 other churches there. This little room was packed with 100 people, or more, probably. And here we are over here worried about cancer and everything else, so they put us in this little corner by ourselves. And man, this guy just got up and he started talking about the things that he was going through, and some of those things were the things that I was going through. And he had a port in his chest and things like that. And he came up with this sermon, "Keep Walking." And he was like, "It may not feel good, keep walking. They may talk about you, keep walking. My boyfriend left me, keep walking. You know, my husband left me, keep walking. You know, and I probably watched that little 1 minute clip. I told Pastor Davis the other day, I said, I probably watched your clip probably at least 100 times. That's just a low estimate, just because I try to tell the truth, you know. So we'll just go with a low estimate of 100. But he does realize, I was going to say he probably doesn't realize what that means to me, but I seen him a few weeks ago and we had a good long talk, and he knows what God did that day. And we were only planning on going there one time, just to be nice to Bishop, just to kind of get him to quit asking us, really, or quit asking me, because he didn't know my wife then, and my wife had never been to a shouting hallelujah church, so she got that experience. And so, you know, 3 hours later, we didn't even looked at our watch, and, you know, we had a good time. So they were like, you know, y'all come back, and, you know, let's exchange phone numbers and all that. And I really wasn't into all that. But man, they grabbed us, and they haven't let us go.
Well, I remember you telling me about the first experience, and you actually forwarded me that little 1 minute keep walking.
Oh yeah.
Which is like this. It was lights out good, and
Yeah.
very.
I'm gonna have to share it with our viewers one day, because
it was motivating.
Yeah,
I mean,
and this was a guy who had been in the hospital for a couple weeks, I believe, maybe 10 days. Hadn't been out of the hospital long, and brought the house down. I mean, gave everything on the altar, you know, and they grabbed onto us, and Bishop Tyson won't let us go. He texts me every morning, and has since June of 2022. I mean, he might miss a weekend here and there, but that's only because he knows he's going to see us at church, because we go there every Sunday now. And that's the Gathering Place Christian Church on 663 Compton Road. Come by and see us. The thing that got me about this church is when we got there, we were scared. And this group of 30 was hungry. They were hungry for answers. They were hungry for healing. They were hungry for financial help. They were looking to God for everything. So how could I not join in them? And Bishop told me, he said, God said you're going to be okay. And because I'd call him and I'd be like, I'm scared. I don't know what to do. My wife's, you know, having a hard time. He's like, we are going to, but why are you scared? And I was like, what do you mean? I got this terrible diagnosis. Well, how can you say that? I got mad at him a few times. And he said, well, do you trust me? And I said, I do. And he said, well, God told me you're going to be okay. And he said, do you believe that? And I did not really.
Yeah,
I didn't really believe that.
When you get your diagnosis, I mean, just from the personal point of view and something like this, I mean, that was a real devastating time for us. Just to hear this, you know.
Yeah.
You know, if you're my age, a diagnosis like that would be devastating and everything else, but I'm not 40 years old.
Yeah. Well, even that's what they were telling me. You know, they were trying to encourage me at the oncologist, but they're like stage 4 and like palliative care nurse, and like if you go to looking up what these things mean, like they're just making you comfortable till it's over. So once we figure out what all that was, I was just, oh my goodness, it was we had some hard times. But I mean, definitely going to church, prayer. And what I did realize a couple weeks ago when, because I did just get clear scans, and I'm in remission now. Yes. Thank you, Lord. It's still weird to say that.
Well, you know, it's like we're looking at it about 18 months out now.
Yeah.
But this is something that you and Sally and Cordell and all the family have been dealing with on a day-to-day basis.
Yeah.
You know, you've had treatments and you've had good reports, and sometimes reports, you know, well, it's not looking so good this time.
Right.
You know, we all have friends and people that we love that have been through stuff, but they're the one, you know, you were the one doing it on a daily basis.
I do believe it was harder on my wife, though. Because once I got okay with what Bishop Tyson told me that I was going to be okay, once I finally jumped out on his faith, because I didn't have any, for me it just was kind of like, okay, every 21 days, here we go get chemo. And you know, I expect to feel bad for several days after that. And but now it's just like, it's almost a shock, but I wasn't really surprised. I expected those scans to be clear because
Well,
I had to.
As somebody who's more cynical and all, I was not.
Right.
And
Nobody else was. My wife's still struggling because being a nurse, she knows that the battle's not over for
No.
us. And it can come back at any time. And, you know, but personally now, my faith is that I will be okay. And if it does come back, I'm not going to blame anybody or anything like that. We'll just do what we did before, but we'll be a little bit better prepared, and we'll be better equipped with, you know, the tools that we need to get us through it, like regular church attendance and prayer, and something that I fail at is reading the Bible. So I'm hoping I can get it back into that, because I'm not much of a reader if it's not about football. Like if Tony Dungy could read me the Bible, that'd be great.
he would do really well with that.
Yeah.
Start with his book.
Oh yeah.
And then that'll tell you, okay.
I have the devotionals and everything. The Uncommon is one of my favorite, and I hate reading. Absolutely hate it. I've read Uncommon 4 or 5 times. I wish I lived Uncommon.
Yeah.
That's a great book, and they also have a couples book too that him and his wife wrote.
Well, he's a great example of somebody who has
Been through
really hard times. You know, he had death of his son, which was just terribly tragic. But somebody who's in the limelight and has experienced earthly success, but is more comfortable and confident because he has eternal success. He knows his destination.
Yeah.
And you can just watch him and see that.
Yeah.
And
Yeah. I tell you, we're not going to keep you long today. Some people had asked me to tell my story, and I just didn't think that it was okay for me to go first, because I really don't want to make this podcast about me. If we can encourage you, or if we can let you hear a good songwriter that, you know, that gives you somebody to follow and go around town to see, or if we can tell you Sean Wright was my favorite so far when he came in and talked about how he answered a phone call one day and they were like, hey, you want to adopt a kid? And he's like, oh, not really, let me ask my wife. And they were like, well, let's meet him. Next thing you know, that they just, all their paperwork went through. He is their son now. And answering the call, you know, because a lot of us aren't willing to answer the call. And I'm one of those who, I don't know, if somebody called me and said, hey, do you want to adopt a kid? That I would jump right on board. But to be in a spot with God and to be in a place where I could go into my home and have a conversation like that. Sean Wright, you really encouraged a lot of people. I had somebody come up to me at the oncologist office the other day and was like, I haven't seen all of them, but that one about Sean Wright really touched my heart.
well, you told me that story, and it is a tremendously powerful story.
Yeah, if you haven't seen that, please go back and watch the Survivor segment with Sean Wright. It's very short, and it will edify your soul, I promise you. But we're not going to keep the people today too long, Bob. I appreciate you coming in and taking the reins today.
Well, it's always good to be out here, and of course, your dad's place, Pop's place, is just first time I've actually been in, but I've seen pictures of it, and I know from going way back to 19, which sounds strange saying that now, but that's been 4 years plus. I know this has always been a special place, and so it's certainly living up to that.
We've had a lot of good nights here. Now we just hope that we can provide something that people can be encouraged by, or find new people by, or, you know, who knows? I don't want to have a whole lot of control over it, because I've tried to control this thing from the beginning, and none of it went as planned. I mean, I've had people come over here and we just sit and talk for hours and not even record anything. So
one closing thing, you touched on not reading your Bible.
Okay.
And you know, I know all pastors will tell you that's very important. And the thing that got me, this was back in 1996.
Okay.
We just moved to Springfield, Illinois, and our pastor there, a wonderful man named Gary Nelson, had a sermon, and he was talking about the importance of reading your Bible. And he said, what are you going to say if you believe in Jesus, you've accepted him as your Savior,
Right.
you know, you're going to go to heaven.
Right.
What are you going to say if God says, well, what did you think about my book? And you go, well, I never really read it. And then that was very convicting because, you know, I knew little snippets and pieces and things. And so that got me on reading the Bible, and I didn't have a plan. I just picked it up, started with Genesis. It took about 2.5 years to get through. In fact, we left Springfield, moved to Kentucky, and then just moved back to Springfield when I finally finished it. But it had an impact, and then after that, subsequent Bible reading became very normal and natural. And of course, my wife is excellent at this kind of stuff, so that in itself is encouraging. So I encourage you and anybody watching.
There you go.
That's the way to the way to go.
So we'll just leave you with that advice today. How about that? Let's go and see if Mom's got a sandwich for us. Y'all take it easy. We'll see you next time. Come on, Bob. Let's go.
Let's go.